What is gratitude? Why is gratitude an essential quality in an effective leader today? I'll explore these questions and so much more with Chester Elton, co-author with Adrian Gostick of Leading with Gratitude. So Chester, why is gratitude, especially today, an essential quality for an effective leader?
We've been doing a lot of research, real time on how do you lead through a crisis. And of course, you can't lead effectively through a crisis if you don't have credibility before the crisis, right? Like, well, trust me now. Well, I didn't trust you before. Why would I trust you now? Those kinds of things. Two things that we found that you really have to amplify and ramp up is communication, right? Because in a communication void, fear fills that void, right? And the second is gratitude. This idea of filling the void with hope and gratitude and celebrating little wins along the way. It's really interesting. It's often seen as a soft skill and a nice to have. I'm telling you, it's absolutely, and the numbers bear it out. We have an enormous database that we draw off of, is that it's not a soft skill, it's a hard skill, and it is not a nice to have, it's a must have, especially when you're going through hard times. People need to be informed and they need to feel valued, and communication and gratitude check both those boxes.
Your book, Chester, does a wonderful job of providing practical advice and guidance. And so why is it so important to create triggers in your work and in your life as a leader to remember to focus on gratitude?
I love the triggers. We got that from our good friend Marshall Goldsmith, who's this incredibly effective and famous executive coach. He says, create triggers just as reminders. We all get busy. We all get, I've got to check the boxes. We're doing hard things today, and I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing more with less. This is unprecedented times. The triggers help remind you to do those things every day that build the culture that you want and that create the right relationships you want. I'll give you a perfect example. We have Carlos Aguilera is one of our favorite executives for Avis Budget Rental Car in Dallas, Texas. And one of the triggers that he sets up for himself is he puts 10 coins in his left pocket. And it reminds him to have 10 positive interactions with his people every day. And the way he keeps track is he moves a penny from his left pocket to his right pocket. A simple little trigger. And it's really interesting as we were interviewing him for our book, All In, which was all about culture. He said, it's interesting. If I get to lunch and I've got 8 pennies in my left pocket, I'm not doing my job. That simple trigger, that simple reminder, really effective, don't you think?
So, Chester, as I was reading your book, I was wondering, to what extent do we need a societal mind shift on gratitude? And what would that mind shift entail?
Well, yeah, it's again, I was just having a conversation that, one of the things I hope happens post-virus is that we're all more grateful, that we're more kind, and we're more patient. It's really interesting. I think the shift needs to happen, that we've really got to believe that we finally have to believe the numbers that, in the States, only about a third of people, and in many cases, less than 30%, get up in the morning and are excited to go to work. And, that's a failure in leadership. Globally, it's even higher. It's, 85% of people in the world say that they're either disengaged or actively disengaged at work. Well, think of the productivity loss. Right? So you've got to finally believe the numbers. And the shift has to be this. And I get this all the time, Michael. So, we coach executives, right? They get their 360. Almost always, gratitude recognition shows up in the bottom third, if not the bottom 2 or 3. And as you talk to these executives, they'll say, well, I would do it more often, but the people think I'm soft. And you can overdo it. I love that one. You can overdo it. It becomes trite. And it becomes, it loses its meaning. And I said, okay, now you've seen your 360, right? I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you think anybody from your team went home and said to their spouse, their partner, their family, man, I just couldn't get anything done today. Like, seriously, every time I turned around, it was like a cake, a thank you card. They were calling me in. They were praising me. There was spotlights. There was fireworks. I got to start working from home. Like, that never, ever happens. And by the way, if you think you can overdo it as a leader, that leader is not you. Okay, so put that out of your head. So that mental shift has to be, look, I had a wonderful leader say, you know what, in my opinion, if you think you're overdoing gratitude and recognition, you're probably about right. That's the shift that needs to happen.
Chester, you point out that managers who lack gratitude suffer first and foremost from a problem of cognition, which I found very interesting. I would hope that you would elaborate on that. And to what extent do ungrateful leaders suffer from an information deficit?
They're kind of tied together, right? They're not getting the right information. They're not looking for the right information. We say, seek out information, seek out, have people tell you what they're doing. Have your team look around. As leaders, we can't always see what's going on, and they're getting a lot of information about maybe products and services and customers. They're not getting the information about their team that they need to put people in a position to succeed. And it is really interesting when you talk about that information deficit. Today people say, look, there's an information overload, and there's no question about that. So in your filters, are you getting the right information? And too often, leaders do not look for the really important information about their team. What motivates them? What engages them at work? What are some of the roadblocks to them being more effective? I love leaders that ask a couple of questions, and they're very simple. Again, it's all very simple, right? Is how are you doing now? And I think in the virus, it's not just how are you doing, it's how are you doing now? Because, you can have some information pop up on your phone, and I'm like everybody else. I go from ridiculously hopeful to absolutely terrified in 30 seconds, right? So I want to know, how are you doing now? And then secondly, how can I help? That question from leaders is really important. So I get where you are. How can I help? And that allows you to really collect all the right information about where they are emotionally, where they are in their tasks and their assignments, where they are in a customer relationship, and how you can help and help them celebrate along the way. I know that was a long answer. Hopefully it made sense.
One of the things people get confused about is they see gratitude as simply being nice. How is gratitude more than simply being nice? And can leaders who express gratitude also be demanding? And perhaps you could illustrate the difference between niceness and gratitude, referencing some of the leaders you profile in your book.
Yeah, I think the perfect example of being incredibly demanding and yet using gratitude every step of the way is Alan Mulally, who, in the last recession saved the Ford Motor Company. A wonderful book, by the way, called American Icon. If you're a big reader, it's fascinating. Great on audio book as well. Well, we got to know Alan quite well. And he is nice. I mean, he's a very nice gentleman. I mean, if you met him, he's a lot of fun, great smile, very engaging. As a leader, incredibly demanding, incredible, very, very accountability first and foremost. He would check in with his leaders every week at Ford. And as it started getting crazy, they would have a check-in every day. And they would check the boxes. Is it green, yellow, or red? How are we doing? Where do we need help? Where do we need resources? And so on and so on. Now, make no mistake about it. People do perceive, if it's a grateful leader or a nice leader, that they are soft. Alan Mulally is anything but soft. They wrote about him in the press in Detroit saying he had a spine of titanium, right? I mean, this is the automotive industry, eat what you kill. And the way he used gratitude and recognition throughout that whole process was phenomenal. Celebrating all the little wins along the way, really thanking people for showing up and going the extra mile. When he got to Ford Motor Company, their engagement scores were 20%. 20% of it, only 2 out of 10 people were showing up thinking this was a great place to work. When he left, it was over 90%. Incredibly demanding, holding his people accountable, and at the same time celebrating along the way. Ken Chenault, the retired CEO from American Express, same way, very demanding. And yet his people loved him because he was so grateful for their efforts. And he knew he was demanding. He knew he was asking a lot. And when they delivered, he was especially grateful for the outcomes. So yes, I mean, it is not an indicator of a soft leader. I think it's an indication of a really engaged leader, and a leader that really wants to not only succeed, wants his whole team to succeed.
Chester, how detrimental is it for a leader to withhold gratitude in tough times like today? Are there any anecdotes you could share from your research that underscores this insight?
Well, I'll tell you, a real life case study right now is Texas Roadhouse. So, so fun, right? Peanuts on the floor, loud music, ice cold margaritas, beer on tap, fall off the bone ribs and hand cut steaks, right? Well, you've got to imagine. And by the way, they have 600 restaurants, just under 70,000 employees. It's a phenomenal organization. They don't advertise nationally. They're very local. They don't call them restaurants. They call them stores. Their store owners are commissioned with becoming the mayor of their town, right? So their takeaway business is about 5% before the virus. Now it's 100%. In 4 weeks, they were able to pivot from 95% of the revenue being in the restaurant to 100% being takeaway to profitability in 4 weeks. In 4 weeks, they became profitable. It's the most unbelievable case study of being agile, being nimble, being engaged, and caring about, number one, your people, number two, your customers, number three, your community. Of those 67,000 employees, and you can understand these are, dishwashers, they're cooks, they're, table servers and meat cutters and bartenders. How many of those people do you think they laid off? Zero. Not one. Not one. In fact, in April, they paid a bonus. April Love, they called it, for the people that are showing up. Now, a lot of people can't come to work, pre-existing conditions, fear, whatever. They said, that's okay. We've got your back. We'll pay you while you're at home. We're going to stay in touch with you while you're at home. We're going to keep you posted. And as things start to get safer and you feel more comfortable, we're going to welcome you back. We're going to welcome you back. Now, let me ask you something. How many people are quitting that job? You read about restaurants. By the way, 5 million people in the restaurant industry lost their jobs in the last month. 5 million. What's really cool about that is not one of them worked for Texas Roadhouse. Right? So this whole idea that I'm going to take care of my people, right? I'm going to take care of my people first. Because in taking care of my people, they're going to take care of my customers. And in taking care of my customers, I'm going to start taking care of my community. They are so involved in their community. On Memorial Day, if you're in the service, you and your family eat for free on that day. They're catering, meals to the nurses in the hospital, to the firemen, to the policemen. They're making sure that people get fed. They make sure people get fed, and they're making sure their people have work. And it's phenomenal. They noticed that in the grocery stores that the grocery stores were running out of meat. And they said, well, we got meat. So curb to grill. We'll sell you the raw meat at below market prices, hand-cut sirloin steaks for $6. It's ridiculous. There's pictures of cars lined up for half a mile to pick up their steaks at Texas Roadhouse. And when you've got your noble cause right, when you've got your mission right, when you really do care about your people, your customers, and your community, that's what happens. When all you care about is your bottom line and checking the boxes and getting things done and getting the widgets out the door, when a virus hits, you're dead. You're dead on arrival.
Chester, your book, Leading with Gratitude, outlines 8 most effective approaches found for showing gratitude in our work. Before we delve into each practice, why did you group these concepts into 2 categories, seeing and expressing?
Because it is different. It's kind of that information deficit that we talk about. If you don't see what's going on, if you don't have that input, how can you possibly express gratitude in a way that's meaningful, right? We talk about call your crazies. My first one in best practice in seeing is solicit and act on input. Hey, what are you seeing out there? What's going on? Tell me about what our customers are saying. Tell me about, you've used our products. Tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And we've already talked about assume positive intent, which is one of my favorites, by the way. And that's why I hope at the end of the virus that we are more grateful, that we are more kind, and we're more patient, right? Be more patient. Walk in their shoes. Look, so often frustration sets in when somebody says, so where did that quota come from? Well, it came from corporate. Well, does corporate have any idea that is an absolutely ridiculous quota? Says they may or they may not. All I know is that's my quota, right? So they have no idea that, we just had Chernobyl hit here, and, nobody's going outside, kind of thing. And then they look for small wins. So often leaders go, well, yeah, look, when we hit the goal, we'll celebrate. Oh, big time. There'll be an open bar, and, there'll be music. It'll be crazy. Well, I often ask those leaders, say, well, don't you think it's important to celebrate small wins along the way? I say, well, why? The goal is the big win. And I'll ask him a simple question. I'll say, look, are you a sports fan? And, most people have some team they cheer for. I say, great. So they'll say, well, I'm a Manchester United, football fan. I say, great. Have you ever been to a match? I go, yeah. So when do you start cheering for Manchester United? He goes, oh, on the way to the match. I go, oh, yeah, the march to the match. You're screaming and yelling. And before the whistle, oh, yeah, we get together with our team. And then, when the game starts, we cheer and scream, and a good pass and a good defense. And, of course, we cheer the goals. I said, great. I'm surprised. And they say, why? I said, well, I would think you'd want to wait to see the final score before you cheer. And they go, well, that's ridiculous. I go, can you connect the dots for me now on this one? Of course we cheer along the way. If you've got kids that play sports, you cheer that they got the cleats on the right feet, So that, celebrating builds momentum. And that's really the message. Celebrating those small wins builds momentum. We're doing this right. It's moving the ball down the field. It's getting us closer to the goal. It's, that's a little better customer satisfaction score, so that you build momentum so that you can hit that big goal. So that's why the seeing is so important. You're walking in their shoes. You're looking for those small wins. You're being patient. You're assuming positive intent, and you're asking for their input. Well, once you've got all that, expressing becomes a lot easier, don't you think?
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with authors, a special series focusing on leading through uncertain times. Subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app, and always at businessofgovernment.org.